wanted to move on to Houston. Another person that you know well from
Houston.
Boston.
Listen, man.
Daryl Morey stepping down.
Daryl Morey stepping down. I'm looking at your list there, and you got, of course, Mike Smith has quotations.
Do I really do it a lot? Do I really do it a lot? I do it a lot, don't I?
Listen, I'm just teasing you a little bit.
I'm self-conscious about it now.
Stepped down, so you believe he was pushed out? Look, I don't know what happened. Daryl Morey, he shot his shot, right? He took his shot at it because when he got there, they didn't have much. They didn't have a superstar, so he cobbled together everything that he had. Went at the time, now this is important to remember, went at a bench player for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now listen, James Harden was he was not a bum. He was not a bum in Oklahoma City.
No.
People thought he had all-star potential. Nobody thought this guy was going to become one of the most transcendent scorers in the NBA, or that he'd become a top 5 player.
He was great in OKC. He was great in OKC. He was the offense's initiator even off the bench. But you're right.
Right.
Nobody saw this. That was one of the best trades.
He went all in.
Memory.
He went all in for James Harden. He did everything that he could, and just went heavy on analytics, which is not a surprise. You know, Daryl Morey is a guy who went to Northwestern and MIT.
He's the patron saint of analytics in the NBA.
He's a numbers savant, and so this is what he did. He applied the numbers to it, and he tried to build his team around that. I was shocked. Just a perfect illustration, Mike, where he trades Clint Capella for Bob Covington. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like, Capella is a young, big man. That's a good player. Covington is just a guy, but he went small, and he took it as far as it could go. He didn't leave anything there. Based on their talent, they got the most out of their talent. So applause to him, applause to whatever coach he had in place, whether it was D'Antoni or anybody else.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I don't know why they pushed him out, though. I don't know. Just we talk
when
about
when I say stepping down. When I say stepping down in quotes, I mean, it's like, listen, I don't doubt, and there was another report, saying that it was 100% his decision. I don't doubt that. But, like whether somebody fires you or you say, I resign, there was something about whether it was, who they were going to hire as head coach, whether it's another run with Jeff Van Gundy or the relationship with Tillman Fertitta, whatever it was, there was something that forced him to decide that this ain't for me anymore. I'm out. You know what I mean? And there was always, rumblings anyway that he might be gone, even around the time when D'Antoni was done. So it wasn't like Daryl Morey was secure, and this is a shocker that he's out in Houston. The how, whether it's him being fired or stepping down, is rather immaterial ultimately. That's why I put it in quotes, because at the end of the day, it wasn't working for him, and now he's no longer working for them. But I'm with you. I do want to start by appreciating what this man did. Because can you have a meaningful legacy without a title? Because if the answer is yes, he's got that.
Ask some of these cats in the NFL, in the Hall of Fame. Yeah, you can. You can. I mean, if you bring about a style of play, if you bring about a trend that kind of pushes the game in a different direction, yeah, you can.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Because, first of all, let's just talk about the run he went on. 13 years, 10 playoff appearances, 8 in a row. I don't believe any other team has made the playoffs each of the last 8 seasons. I think they stand alone in that. That's number one. Number two, they take the Warriors to 7 games in 18 and shoot 7 of 44 from 3. So you want to talk about cruel. They should have at least had 1 finals appearance, okay? But beyond that, either the team or him as a general manager, and I'm not just talking about tweets about Hong Kong, they were never boring. And that's what I appreciate the most about him. People could say, oh, I hate watching James Harden play, or I hate watching him chuck threes. First of all, let's go back to his moves.
I hate watching him shoot free throws. It's a free throw.
Yeah.
I know analytics people love free throws.
He never left the stone unturned, because it wasn't just the James Harden trade. It was then bringing aboard, like what he did to create room to bring Dwight Howard aboard back when that was a big thing. and we might bring up Dwight Howard again later, reports about him. But bringing Dwight Howard aboard to team with James Harden was a major free agent acquisition at the time. Trading for Chris Paul, trading for Russell Westbrook, it almost felt like he was playing with a different set of rules and a different salary cap because he always found a way to tinker. He was my kind of general manager. You know me, man. I like to tinker. You know, I always just around the edges. Can I move this piece and this piece here and this piece here and this here? And bam, here's the big one. Like he always had something up his sleeve, and I love that about him. And again, you know, he ushered in a different, not ushered in, but popularized, you know, a different methodology when it came to basketball.
I think you say it right. I think he did usher it in, even though they didn't win a championship. So, and it brought about.
If nothing else, they were polarizing. That's the word I was looking for. They were polarizing.
You say polarizing.
You loved them or you hated them.
I was about to say provocative, but same idea. He was a provocateur. I mean, he's that guy. I remember Draymond Green saying a while ago, just kind of, hey, what's this analytic? You know, he was pushing back at analytics, some of the things you're supposed to do. Like, why would you take a long two when you could step back and take a three? It's better value. And he was kind of pushing back against some of the stuff. And we know analytics, some of the critics of analytics say, look, it's exclusionary in the wrong way, that it just by its nature leaves out people of color. So there's some criticism to that. But Daryl Morey was very good at it, and he was inclusive with it. Shane Battier swears by it. Shane Battier worked with the Rockets in the front office. So for a while now, he's working with the front office with the Miami Heat. He's an analytics guy. The reason Shane Battier got to Houston in the first place because Daryl Morey looked at him and said, yes, that's my kind of guy. So think about those guys, not just the stars, but he liked Chuck Hayes. He liked Shane Battier. He looked at Robert Covington, like a guy with some size who can shoot threes. So he was doing a little bit different. He evaluated players differently. And I've got to tell you, a little known fact about Daryl Morey, he's a good talent evaluator when it comes to the front office, too. The assistant general manager of the Celtics, Mike Zarin, was hired by Daryl Morey. And it came down to, check this out, it came down to Mike Zarin, who's still there, and the director of analytics for Twitter now. So he looked at both of these guys, said, hey, you guys have it. So one guy's assistant GM of the Celtics, one guy is running Twitter analytics today.
Is there, tell me if this is a stretch. I'm just spitballing. Tell me if this is a stretch. Is there a Billy Beane comparison? Is that apt? As somebody who really kind of revolutionized the way teams were constructed and the way they played the game, but never really got over the hump with that. But other teams copied the approach and maybe had success for whatever reason. Because everybody constructs teams, you know, with threes and free throws, and for the most part, you know, I mean, the Lakers almost turned back the clock by going big again. But small ball is like, you know, everybody does it now.
Every step of the way, that analogy doesn't fall apart. There's nothing about the Billy Beane, Daryl Morey analogy that falls apart. It doesn't. You think about, okay, neither one of them won a championship, so that's where the hater in you comes out and says, okay, yeah, that's great, that's cute, but you didn't win a championship. So the critics are the same. There are people who paid attention to it. There are people who looked at the guy himself, and said, okay, what is this? You were annoyed by it, but you were drawn to it. So every step of the way, that Billy Beane, Daryl Morey, hey, this is a different way to look at the game, and some of the traditionalists didn't like it. There were managers who worked for Billy Beane who said, you're kind of devaluing what I do. And think about it. There was friction between Mike D'Antoni and Daryl Morey at times. You know, they talked about the contract. So it really, that's a good comparison, Mike. I think that's it.
Yeah.
The Billy Beane of basketball.
It's one of those teams that I don't think it's the fact that they never got over the hump is somehow an indictment or referendum that the methodology or was flawed. It happens, man. I mean, not to mention they unfortunately were in the time of the Warriors. You know, maybe there's inherent flaws with James Harden and his ability to perform at a high level, in critical moments. Maybe it might not be about the system or analytics. It just it in the cards for them. But like I said, the legacy is there. Speaking of Harden, though, what does this mean for them? They feel kind of stuck. Like, they feel like one of those teams, talking about the Clippers just running it back. They feel like a roster that's just really going to run it back. Maybe they look different, obviously different head coach. Maybe it's Jeff Van Gundy. But it doesn't feel like there's a whole lot of options for them in terms of what they can do as a franchise to try to improve.
That's all they got. That's all they got. That's it. You know, how much further are you going to go with Russell Westbrook and James Harden? In the West.
What would somebody trade them for James Harden that would make it worth their while is what I'm wondering too. Like, even if they wanted to blow it up, could they with that contract and the money they owe him?
Yeah. For James Harden? Yeah.
You think somebody would give him enough to make it worth their while to unload him? And I'm not even sure they want to blow it up.
Well, I was going to say, it depends on what they're trying to do. Yeah. Because you know what, if they blow it up, if you trade James Harden, I'll tell you who you are. You know, it's funny. It's just so weird. There's so many slots there are like 3 or 4 slots in the NBA, not more. Okay, there's the terrible team slot, right? There's a lottery. So you're in a lottery. That's one. Then your championship level. And then there's that first, second round.
Purgatory.
I'm going to call it the Oklahoma City slot. If you trade James Harden, you get a bunch of picks in return, and you get a young player with potential. You're Oklahoma City, who you just beat in the first round in 7 games. Like, the line is so thin between Houston and Oklahoma City, and maybe the line is James Harden.
Yeah.
You get James Harden out of there.
But as long as he's on the team,
you're OKC.
But as long as he's on the team, even if they play differently, even if a Jeff Van Gundy or somebody comes in and convinces James Harden to give up the ball, even if they play a different style of basketball, they're still a playoff team. They're not gonna miss the playoffs. You know, they're still good enough to. So to your point, they're not a championship caliber team. You know, and it's still a few steps away from bottoming out enough to, you know, to start fresh. Here's the most interesting angle to this, though. I've been waiting to get to this. Gary, throw those tweets back up again. Because I wasn't on Twitter, but I did find it on the internet as I was just kind of, you know, perusing for a reaction to James Harden. My man Shea Serrano from The Ringer. Look at this tweet at the very bottom. Look at the one at the bottom, Michael. Daryl Morey, take over the Texans, please. I'm begging you. Yo, that's like a thing, though. That's like a thing. No, I mean, the idea of him pulling a Paul DePodesta, going back to I'm connected. Look at that. Look at that full circle connection right there. Pulling a Paul DePodesta who went from, you know, the Dodgers, I believe, was his last stop before he went to the Browns. Okay, and not that that's worked out famously, but nonetheless, there's precedent for crossing over from sports. Here are the Texans. You know, they have Jack Easterby as their interim general manager. He's already in Houston. I don't think Daryl Morey's intellect or management style is exclusive to basketball. With the right personnel evaluators around him, you know, you already said he's got an eye for talent. Yeah, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by him staying in Houston and taking over the Texans.
You should be more than intrigued. We should stay on top of this. This is going to be on your list sometime. So it's going to be on your feed, Mike's feed.
Okay.
It's going to come up. It's going to be Morey to, and it may not be the Texans, but it's going to be a team in another sport. I'm going to tell you why. One, Daryl Morey, before he got into basketball was not where he thought he was going. He was initially part of a ownership group to buy the Red Sox. So he thought, and he worked for Bill James. So he thought he was going to work in baseball. Now, he wanted to work in basketball, but he thought he was going to work in baseball. So he was ready for that. So the guy who was going to work in baseball goes to business with the Celtics, not front office. He was working in the business department, then goes to basketball in the front office with the Houston Rockets. I would not put it past him. It's not an outrageous tweet. Shea Serrano, give you props. Maybe it's a tweet that makes you laugh, but it's a tweet that is very real.
There are reports. There are reports of NFL insiders. It's not just Shea. There are reports from NFL insiders who are saying that their sources are telling them that, again, based on the DePodesta precedent, for example, like a Morey running an NFL team, again, with the right staff, is not a stretch and that he could
No,
be successful. Now, listen,
man,
it'd be hard to, I have a hard time believing that, another 20 some odd teams in the NBA that nobody would be interested, and, by extension, that Daryl Morey wouldn't find them interesting for him to have another NBA stop. But if he wanted to stay put in Houston and take on an interesting challenge, and we just talked about how he found a way to maneuver, around the rules and the system and move, think 2-3 steps ahead. What are the Texans devoid of? Draft capital. They got a roster that you look at like,
trade.
Man.
And they're devoid of, they really struggle with placing value on their own players and other players. Like, other people look at players and say, we don't want them anymore. And the Texans, under Bill O'Brien, said, sure, we'll take them. And it's been some bad moves. They've overpaid for other players, and they have not gotten value on their great players that they've traded, namely DeAndre Hopkins. But there have been others too. I mean, they didn't really get much when they moved on from Jadeveon Clowney either. But hey, pay attention. This is a good one. This is a good one.
I'll just say this as we go to break. I'd rather Morey end up with an NFL team than an NBA team at this point.